It was supposed to be just another sunny afternoon, kids laughing, neighbors walking their dogs, and a little boy with a big dream, selling water bottles to passers-by. But in a quiet suburban neighborhood run by a strict HOA, one woman wasn't having it. Known around the block as the ultimate Karen, she decided that a child's small water stand was a serious violation that needed immediate action. Without warning, she whipped out her phone and called the police, claiming the boy was causing disturbances and operating illegally. What she didn't expect was how quickly things would spiral out of her control. When officers arrived, they didn't find a wild scene or dangerous activity, just a smiling kid trying to earn a few dollars. And when they started piecing together what really happened, it became clear that the only real disturbance was the false report itself. In a shocking turn of events, the police turned their attention away from the child and toward the woman who made the call. Was this just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, or was there something more behind Karen's reaction? As tensions rose and the neighborhood watched from their porches, the situation took an unexpected twist, and it wasn't the kid who ended up in trouble. Stay tuned to find out what happened next. Neighbors later shared that this wasn't the first time the HOA Karen had stirred up drama. Over the past few months, she had built a reputation for patrolling the block, clipboard in hand, ready to point out the smallest rule violations, from a mailbox being slightly tilted to a lawn being 2 inches too tall. But this time, it was different. People couldn't believe she would actually call the police on a child selling water on a hot day, especially when everyone else saw it as innocent and harmless. As the officers asked more questions, it became clear that Karen's story didn't exactly add up. She kept insisting the boy was creating safety concerns, but she struggled to explain exactly what the danger was. Meanwhile, the boy's mom, who had been keeping an eye on her son from their driveway, walked over, confused and worried. She explained how her son had just wanted to raise money to buy a new bike, setting up his little table with neatly stacked water bottles and a homemade sign that said "Cold Water $1." The neighborhood began gathering, whispering among themselves, recording bits of the scene with their phones. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others started speaking up, backing the boy's story. But Karen wasn't backing down yet. She had one more card to play. Karen, growing more flustered by the minute, started pointing at the water stand and claiming it violated HOA rules about unlicensed vendors and unauthorized business activity. She even waved a printed copy of the neighborhood guidelines, highlighting a paragraph that she insisted proved her right. But the officers remained calm, listening carefully as more neighbors stepped in to defend the boy. One woman said she had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years and had never seen anyone react so aggressively over something so harmless. Another man mentioned how, just last summer, kids sold lemonade without a single complaint. Meanwhile, the boy, standing quietly by his little table, looked up at the growing crowd with wide eyes. His mom stood protectively by his side, her arms crossed tightly, clearly trying to stay composed. The officers asked Karen if she had spoken to the HOA board or filed any complaints before calling the police, but she dodged the questions, insisting it was an emergency because strangers were stopping by to buy water. Tension thickened in the air. Some neighbors shook their heads, muttering about how tired they were of Karen's antics. A few even began filming openly, whispering about posting the video online. Through it all, Karen kept pushing, demanding the boy pack up and leave immediately. But the officers weren't moving in her favor, and Karen's frustration was only just beginning. The officers, now surrounded by more than a dozen neighbors, grew more serious. One of them calmly asked Karen once again to explain exactly what crime she believed had taken place. Her answers became more scattered, bouncing between disturbing the peace and unlawful selling without giving any solid details. The boy's mom stayed close, her voice shaking slightly as she tried to reason with the officers, explaining that they were only there for a few hours, just to teach her son about hard work and saving up for something he wanted. The crowd was growing restless. More neighbors began pulling out their HOA documents, showing that there were no clear rules against kids selling drinks in front of their homes. A few even mentioned that Karen had made false reports before, cawing about a dog barking that wasn't even real, and complaining about Halloween decorations being too scary. The officers listened. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One of the officers asked to review the 911 call Karen had made. As they listened to her words, you could see the mood change. The call was filled with exaggerations, claiming there was a huge crowd, loud shouting, and unsafe activity, none of which matched the calm scene in front of them. Karen's face turned red as she realized the officers weren't buying it. The tension hit a boiling point. The boy stood frozen behind his little stand. His mom held her breath. The whole neighborhood watched silent, waiting for the officer's next move. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense, another unexpected twist hit the scene. One of the neighbors, a soft-spoken older man who had mostly stayed back, stepped forward with his phone in hand. He told the officers he had security camera footage from his porch that captured the entire situation from the start. The officers immediately showed interest, and a small group crowded around to watch. The video didn't show a crowd or chaos like Karen had described. It showed a peaceful little stand, a few smiling neighbors buying water, and Karen pacing angrily up and down the sidewalk, glaring at the boy. At one point, the footage even caught her taking pictures of the stand and muttering under her breath. The officers exchanged a look, and the tension in the air tightened even more. Karen, realizing the video didn't support her story, tried to shift blame again, claiming she was just looking out for the community and trying to keep the neighborhood safe. But her voice cracked slightly, and it was clear the tide was turning against her. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors shook their heads in disbelief. Others began speaking louder about how tired they were of being policed by one person's narrow view of the rules. The officers huddled briefly, speaking in low tones. Karen's eyes darted nervously from the officers to the growing crowd. The boy clutched his water bottle tighter, and his mom put a hand on his shoulder, silently bracing for what would happen next. After a tense few moments, the officers turned back to Karen. One of them, speaking firmly but calmly, explained that filing a false police report was a serious matter. He told her that not only had her call wasted police resources, but it also could have created unnecessary fear in the neighborhood. Karen's face dropped. She tried to interrupt, saying she didn't mean any harm, but the officer cut her off, letting her know she would be cited for false reporting. The neighbors, who had been holding their breath, started murmuring louder. A few even clapped quietly, though the officers quickly asked everyone to stay respectful. Karen stood frozen for a moment, then finally pulled out her ID with shaking hands. Meanwhile, the boy's mom knelt down next to her son, whispering something that made him crack a small, relieved smile. It was clear that for once, the community had come together against unfair treatment, and the kid wasn't the one who would have to pack up and leave. But just as it seemed like things were wrapping up, one final twist hit. The president of the HOA, who had heard about the situation and rushed over, arrived on the scene. She immediately apologized to the boy and his mother, and then, in front of everyone, announced that Karen was officially being reviewed for harassment complaints by the HOA board. The crowd gasped. Karen's expression went from angry to stunned as she realized this wasn't just a warning. It could mean she'd lose her spot on the HOA committee altogether. The boy, still holding his water bottle, looked up at his mom, and for the first time all day, they both truly smiled. As Karen quietly gathered her things and left the scene, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual peaceful buzz. The officers stayed for a few more minutes, reassuring the boy and his mom that they had done nothing wrong. Neighbors came over to buy more water, offering smiles, kind words, and even extra tips. The boy's face lit up with pride as he handed out bottles, his dream of a new bike suddenly feeling a lot closer. The HOA president stayed behind too, speaking with several residents about creating clearer, fairer guidelines so no one else would have to go through something like this again. It was a powerful moment where the whole community realized how important it is to stand up against unfair behavior, even when it's uncomfortable. Karen's actions had backfired, not just in front of the police, but in front of everyone she had tried to control. And while it wasn't about revenge, there was a strong sense that justice had been served in a peaceful, respectful way. In the end, a simple water stand turned into a symbol of resilience, kindness, and community spirit. And for one little boy with a big dream, it was a day he would never forget.